Okay, today we're solving chapter 13:5. It is similar to what we did in chapter 10, solving rational equations. The difference is now when you simplify everything, you have multiple ways to solve. So whereas before the only way you could solve was by factoring, and if you had a lead coefficient, you had to do lead coefficient factoring, now you may use the quadratic formula or completing the square or square root method. So every time we have a variable in the denominator, what are we remembering to do? Restriction. What is the restriction? X cannot equal 1. So we can do this in two ways. We can do our cross products or we can clear. So I'm going to do cross products. X times x minus 1 equals 2 times the quantity of x minus 1. And then I distribute x squared minus x equals 2x minus 2. Now what? Now what?
Subtract 2x from both sides.
Subtract 2x from both sides. Then add 2. What's the easiest way to finish this up? X marks the spot. Let's factor it. Who thinks factoring's this? You have three methods. Three methods, really. Who thinks factoring's the easiest? Factoring, quadratic formula, or completing the square? Raise your hand if you think factoring's the easiest. Raise your hand if you think quadratic formula is the easiest. Raise your hand if you think it's completing the square. So at this point, you get to go with what you want. Okay? I think factoring's pretty easy, so I go with this. What multiplies to 2 and adds to negative 3? What is it? X minus 2 times x minus 1 equals 0. So x is equal to 2 and x is equal to 1. Do they both work? Huh? 1 does not work. It's an extraneous solution. So only 2 is working. Questions? You guys remembering this? Okay, let's try the next one. You want to try this one on your own? Yes or no? No? Okay, I'll give you a little head start. How's that? Okay, what are the restrictions here?
X can't equal 0.
X can't equal 0. And what would I do to start simplifying this? Multiply all terms by x. Good. And now when I distribute, what do we get?
X squared plus 5 equals 6x.
Yep, x squared plus 5, the x's cancel, equals 6x. Now let's put it to standard form, subtract 6x. We have to, I'm still going to want to factor what multiplies to 5 and adds to negative 6. Multiplies, what'd you say, negative 1. Yep. So it's x minus 1, x minus 5. Okay, and so do both of those solutions work?
Yes.
So our solutions are 1 and 5. Yes?
Why did you multiply times the x and
That little 1 and 5? Why did I multiply by this? I multiply by the least common denominator to clear it out. It's clearing fractions. So remember when we used to do like 2/3 x plus 5 over 6 equals 10. The first thing we would do is clear our fractions and multiply and get it out of the denominator. Do you remember? Okay. So that's why we're trying to find the least common denominator so we can clear the denominator. Can I move on to the next page? All right. What is x not allowed to be?
0, 6.
Yep. What would be my least common denominator here?
X minus 6.
Close.
So x times x minus 6.
Yes, you need an x to cancel out just the x's alone, and an x minus 6 to cancel out the binomial. So now when I distribute, remember this whole thing, not the reduced amount, gets distributed every time. Here the x is going to cancel out, and I'll be left with x minus 2 times x minus 6, right? Here, the x minus 6 cancels out, and I'm left with x times minus x times x minus 3. When I distribute the whole thing over here, I'm left with 4, the x cancels, and I'm left with x minus 6. Now, double distribute. X squared, add these two together, what do you get?
Negative 8.
Negative 8x. Multiply these two together,
12.
plus 12, minus x squared minus 3x equals 4x minus 24. That should be a plus. Yeah. Minus x squared plus 3x. Now I'm going to combine my like terms. This and this cancel out. So then I'm left with negative 8x, positive 3x, make negative 5x, and I've got that plus 12 equals 4x minus 24. I'm going to add 5x, add 5x. I'm also going to add 24, add 24, 0, oh, whoops. 9x equals 36, divide by 9, and x equals 4. Does that work? So this actually only has one solution. All right, can I erase that? Okay, questions? Pause the recording if you need more time for notes. All right, next one. What is my restriction?
X cannot equal 1 or negative 1.
1 or negative 1. What is my least common denominator?
X plus 1 times x minus 1.
Why don't you try this one on your own? Go. Pause the recording and try it on your own. What are we multiplying to get rid of the denominator?
X plus 1 times the quantity of x minus 1.
Good. And then when I distribute here, I'm going to have like kind of this three-way multiplication. So I end up with negative 2 times x plus 1 times x minus 1. When I distribute to the next one, what gets cross-canceled?
The x plus 1.
So we're left with x minus 1 equals x minus 1. Plus, what gets cross-canceled on the next distribution?
Minus 1, so you're left with 3 times the quantity of x plus 1.
And it's plus 3. So when I'm multiplying three things at a time, since this is a difference of squares, and I know what that is automatically, I go right for that first. X squared minus 1 times 2, that becomes 2x squared minus 2. Does that make sense? Oh yeah, sorry. Negative, negative, positive. Right? So I go right for distributing that negative 2. And then I've got the x minus 1, and I distribute the 3x plus minus 3, plus 3. Okay? And on this side, I can combine my like terms to x and 3x make 4x, and this makes positive 2. Now what?
You could subtract 2 from both sides.
Sure. Subtracting the 2. And what am I doing with the negative 2x squared?
Add it to both sides.
Yep.
I would.
And then I'll add 2. Okay, oh, I guess they're moving it. I don't know that I would move it this way. I would have added it. Because I don't like to be left with a lead coefficient that's negative. but it's not going to hurt. It's not that bad to factor. What can I factor here?
You can factor out a negative 2x.
Negative 2x. And negative 2x times x plus 2, set them both equal to 0. Negative 2x equals 0. X plus 2 equals 0. Divide by negative 2. X is equal to 0. Subtract 2. Does this match our restrictions? So we have two solutions that work, right? 0 and negative 2. Questions? All right, let's go. So next one, you want to try it on your own?
Yeah.
Pause the recording. Try the next one on your own. So what are my restrictions, please? Noah?
Your restrictions are x cannot equal 1 and x cannot equal 0.
Good. X cannot equal 1 and x cannot equal 0. Good. And then my common denominator is x minus 1 times x. When you distribute, we should have 3x plus 8 times x minus 1 equals 3 times x minus 1. Did you get there? We double distribute. Should have 11x minus 8. Everything over. Now, this is where we are going different. In the past, we had to factor. Lead coefficient. I'm not a fan. So that's where I'm going to start my x equals negative b. So negative, what is my a? What's my b? What's my c?
A is 3.
A equals 3, b equals negative 14, and c equals 8. So x equals negative 14 plus or minus the square root of negative 14 squared minus 4 times 3 times 8 all over 2 times 3. So x equals 14 plus or minus the square root of 196 minus 96. Ooh, love that. All over 6. So x equals 14 plus or minus 100, the square root of 100, all over 6. X equals 14 plus or minus 10 over 6. So we're doing 14 plus 10 over 6. That's 24 over 6 is 4. And this would be 14 minus 10 over 6, which equals 4 over 6, which is 2/3. So our solutions are 4 and 2/3. Does that work for both?
Yes.
Okay, questions? Yes.
How do you know to solve it that way and not?
We have choices. The only thing that's different about this lesson is before you only had one way that you knew.
Oh, so you just chose to do it the
I
other way.
chose to do it that way.
You could have.
I don't like lead coefficient factoring.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever you want, you could complete the square here. I wouldn't want to do that either because it has a lead coefficient. That's why I chose. Got it? It's really the only difference in this lesson is that now you have choices when you simplify it down. All right, let's try. See, they're doing this lead coefficient factoring. I just don't like it. Okay, go. Next one. You guys. All right, what is x not allowed to be? Negative 2, or you have to factor that other one. So when you factor it,
It would be x plus x times the quantity of x plus 2.
so negative 2 works and 0. Okay, so you have two restrictions. Okay, what are we multiplying everything by?
X times x plus 2.
Good, x times x plus 2. Did you do that or did you forget about that? Okay, so when I distribute the first time, what's left?
X.
Just 2x, good. When I distribute the second time, what's left? The x cancels. Oh yeah, just the x. And when I distribute the third time, we're left with everything. 1 times x plus 2. So I'm going to distribute, set it all equal to 0. And this is easy enough to factor. So what divides into both? X times x plus, come on guys, factor it. These binomials are so easy. I divide an x out, it's just GCF. X plus 1 equals 0. So my solutions here are x equals 0 or x equals x plus 1 equals 0. Subtract the 1. So it's x equals negative 1. And this is the only one that works. X equals 0 does not work. Questions? How many people forgot to find that 0 and then use the 0 as their solution? That would have been marked wrong. If you didn't catch that it can't be a restriction and it shows up as one of your answers, then you're going to get that wrong. All right, let's go. One more. 2 more, I think we have. 2 more. Ready? Go. Restrictions are...
1
And what?
0.
0. What's my GCF? My least common denominator, sorry. X times x minus 1. Okay, go. Okay, so now when I distribute, what gets cross-canceled first time? So we're left with x times 2x plus 3. Second time, we're left with plus the quantity of x minus 1. Third time, we're left with equals 3x. Double distribute. Just get rid of the parentheses. Simplify and set it all equal to 0. So that's going to be 2x squared plus 4x minus 1, subtract the 3x, 2x plus 1. I might do my quadratic formula just to get you guys used to not factoring with, a equals 2, b equals 1, c equals negative 1, x equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 1 all over 2 times 2. X equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 plus 8 all over 4. It doesn't work anymore. So x equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 9, which is 3 over 4. You know what? Let's just change that to 3. Is this getting any faster for you? Yes. So it's 1 plus 3 divided by 4, 1 minus 3 divided by 4. So that's 1, and that's negative 2 over 4.
Isn't it negative 1 plus 3 and negative 1 minus 3?
Oh, you're right. So it's opposite. It's 2 over 4, which is 1 over 2, and this is negative 4 over 4, so it's negative 1. Okay, so the only answer is 1/2. Let's see what they did. They've probably factored. Yep, this is their factoring. Oh, yeah, it's -1, so we do have, so when I said that, you're right, it's -1, it can be +1. The solutions are -1 and 1/2. Got it? Okay. Huh? Yes. Okay, next, go. Pause the recording, do the last, I think this is the last one. This one together. First of all, we have to factor our denominator so we always know what's in it. It's x squared over x plus 2 times x minus 2 plus 1 over x plus 2 equals 3 over x minus 2. So what are my restrictions? 2 or -2. What is my least common denominator?
X minus 2 times x plus 2.
Yep, x minus 2, x plus 2. So we have to multiply by all terms by that. As I distribute, on the first one, everything gets cross-canceled, and we're left with x squared. The second one, x plus 2 gets canceled. We're left with plus x minus 2 times 1. We don't really need that. The third one, I'm left with x minus 2, and we're left with times 3. We distribute, and we are left with, set it all equal to 0. This looks like an easy one to factor. What multiplies to -8 and adds to -2? Good, so it's x plus 2 times x minus 4 equals 0. So x plus 2 equals 0, x minus 4 equals 0. So x equals -2 and x equals 4. So do both of those work?
No.
This one doesn't, this one doesn't. So my only solution is x equals 4. Questions? All right, that's our lesson. Any questions? All right, pause it if you want to keep recording this, and we are out.